The courtroom was a pressure cooker of tension. Rows of spectators sat in rigid silence, their eyes darting between the judge's bench and the defense table. The air was thick with anticipation, the kind that made it hard to breathe. Overhead, the fluorescent lights buzzed softly, casting a pale, sickly glow over the polished wooden benches and the somber faces of the jurors. At the front of the room, Judge Harold Grayson sat high on his bench, his expression one of thinly veiled boredom. He was a man in his late 50s, with a receding hairline and a permanent scowl etched into his face. To him, this was just another day, another case, another defendant wasting his time. But today would be different. At the defense table sat Evelyn Mitchell, a woman in her early 30s, dressed in a sharp, tailored gray suit. Her dark hair was pulled back into a sleek ponytail, and her posture was impeccable, back straight, hands folded neatly on the table. She exuded an air of quiet confidence, but Judge Grayson didn't notice. To him, she was just another black woman who had, in his mind, undoubtedly brought this upon herself. He glanced down at the case file, his lips curling into a smirk. Well, he drawled, his voice dripping with condescension. Another day, another defendant who thinks the rules don't apply to them. He chuckled, a low, grating sound that echoed through the silent courtroom. A few jurors shifted uncomfortably in their seats, but no one dared to speak. Evelyn didn't flinch. Her expression remained neutral, her gaze steady. She was used to this, used to the assumptions, the dismissiveness, the thinly veiled prejudice. But today, she wasn't here to play the victim. Today, she was here to make a point. The prosecutor, a middle-aged man with a receding hairline and a nervous twitch, stood up. "Your Honor, the defendant, Miss Evelyn Mitchell, is charged with—" Judge Grayson cut him off with a wave of his hand. "Spare me the formalities," he said, leaning back in his chair. "I've heard it all before. Let's get to the part where she claims this is all a big misunderstanding." He smirked, clearly enjoying himself. Evelyn's lips twitched, the faintest hint of a smile. But it wasn't the smile of someone nervous or unsure. It was the smile of someone who knew something no one else did. Judge Grayson noticed and frowned. "Something amusing, Miss Mitchell?" he asked, his tone sharp. Evelyn leaned forward slightly, her voice calm and measured. "With all due respect, Your Honor, I'd prefer to stick to the facts rather than opinions." The judge's smirk faltered for a split second. He wasn't used to defendants talking back, especially not ones who looked like her. "Facts?" he echoed mockingly. "All right, Miss Mitchell. Let's hear your facts." Evelyn reached into the inner pocket of her blazer. The bailiff stiffened, his hand instinctively moving toward his belt. Judge Grayson rolled his eyes, ready to make a snide comment about reckless behavior, but then she pulled out a small black leather case and flipped it open. For a moment, the courtroom was dead silent. Inside the case was a golden badge, gleaming under the harsh fluorescent lights. Bold, unmistakable letters were engraved across it: United States Secret Service. Judge Grayson's face drained of color. The prosecutor's pen slipped from his fingers and clattered onto the table. A few jurors leaned forward, their eyes wide with disbelief. Evelyn set the badge on the table with a deliberate clink, like a royal flush in a high-stakes poker game. "My name," she said, her voice steady and clear, "is Special Agent Evelyn Mitchell, United States Secret Service." The judge's jaw clenched. He was stunned into silence. Evelyn let the moment hang in the air, savoring the shift in power. Then she continued, her tone calm but commanding. "And before we proceed any further, I think it's important to acknowledge that my arrest was not only unjustified, but also a direct violation of federal law." Judge Grayson swallowed hard, his hands gripping the edge of his desk so tightly that his knuckles turned white. Evelyn reached into her bag again, this time pulling out a sealed government document. "This," she said, sliding the folder toward the bailiff, is an official complaint drafted by the Department of Justice. It details the numerous violations committed by the officers who arrested me, including the falsified report that made its way to this courtroom. The prosecutor's face was now a mix of shock and fear. He flipped through his own documents frantically, as if trying to piece together how he had missed this information. Evelyn straightened her blazer and looked Judge Grayson directly in the eye. "You see, Your Honor," she said, her voice calm but cutting, "the officers who arrested me never bothered to check my credentials. Instead, they assumed that because of the color of my skin, I must have been doing something wrong." The weight of her words crushed the room. The courtroom was deathly silent, the kind of silence that feels like a physical presence. "And now," Evelyn continued, "I find myself sitting in front of a judge who, instead of conducting a fair trial, mocked me before hearing a single piece of evidence." Judge Grayson looked like he had just aged 10 years. His arrogance had vanished, replaced by a palpable sense of panic. Evelyn leaned forward slightly, her gaze unwavering. "This isn't just about me," she said. "This is about a system that allows people in power to abuse their authority without question. But today, Judge Grayson, you questioned the wrong person." She paused, letting her words sink in. "And I promise you, this is far from over." The prosecutor jumped to his feet, his voice trembling. "Your Honor, in light of this new information, the prosecution requests that all charges against Miss Special Agent Mitchell be immediately dropped." Judge Grayson's lips pressed into a thin line. He looked like he wanted to melt into his chair. After a long, agonizing pause, he cleared his throat. "Case dismissed," he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. The gavel slammed down, but for the first time in his career, it wasn't his authority that silenced the room. Evelyn gathered her things and walked toward the exit, her heels clicking against the polished floor. But before she stepped out, she paused. She turned her head just slightly, her voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "Next time," she said, her words slow and deliberate, "think before you laugh." And with that, she walked out, leaving Judge Grayson sitting there, pale, humiliated, and knowing his career was over. Because after today, the world would hear about this. Subscribe for more interesting stories like this. Please note this is not a real story, it's a work of fiction only for education and entertainment purposes.